Let it fill up, fill up, fill up, fill up. It's raining where I'm at. One of the biggest. Welcome. Before we get in that, I'm gonna start with this. Last week, I started back up my Friday night sessions. If you're not familiar, if you're not familiar with me, I'm Papa Samdi, Papa Lucifer Samdi, occult psychoanalyst, spiritual therapist, holistic healer, spiritual therapist, however you want to put it in, whatever you want to put in there. Ultimately, we deal with the shadows. Recently, going to give out some announcements. Recently, the live that we did last Friday, every Friday, 8 p.m., Papa Shadow Sessions. I just recently went to my YouTube channel, revamped my YouTube channel, put some new things into the YouTube channel, put it under the Papa Samdi name under there. So all the links, you type in Papa Samdi, is going to take you to my page. The one we did last week, what we got into last week was the aspects of predestination versus purpose. And I thought for that space, that's a perfect thing to start with when we're coming into this aspects of really understanding this healing process. What I specialize in is dealing with the shadow work, dealing with your shadows, dealing with those things, understanding that inside of that space, I don't care how conscious you become, how spiritual you become, how many crystals you grab, how much sage you grab, how many sigils you learn to draw, how many altars you build, all of these things. In avoiding in this aspect, because I thought the same thing, in avoiding that aspect of your humanity, not understanding that in between, in the aspects of, we think about the traumatic experiences where you do not understand your emotions, understanding simply what a trauma is. A trauma is any point that disengaged or does not allow you to regulate the emotions from that space. That means it creates an emotional stunting, or what we call in that healing aspect, that emotional void. And the most important part to understand about these aspects is when we got into the live last Friday, we got into the aspects of predestination. That means the state of, because of my trauma, this is what I must be. So now you're emulating. So now you're in a constant state of emulation. So you think about it like this: mother wounds. Think about the mother wounds. Think about the father wounds. Think about these wounds of how you think about it. It can be something as simple as the first time you were told no, that you couldn't have a fucking cookie. No, you couldn't have your friends come over. And you didn't understand inside of that space the reason why your mother said it, or going into this space. One of the things I told one of my clients actually earlier this week was, you're going to get to a point with yourself where you really have to sit and be like, wait, I cannot keep blaming others for how I am constantly reacting. It becomes this state of babysitting. So then when we're leading into this week, and the link is, I don't know how to put that link up there and have the link stay for my Cash App link, but I will be doing live readings towards the end, question and answers. Question and Q&A live readings. I'm going to do readings for 11/11 since we're in that 11/11 portal. So the readings are $11.11 dropped into my Cash App. $ Lucifer, LUCIFER, Samdi, capital SAMDEI, Lucifer Samdi. Or you can just support into the aspects of that. Or after this, remember, I'm going to say it at the beginning, I'm going to say it at the end. This is the beginning. From this live, from this conversation that we're going to have, this is the beginning. What you do with this, don't wait. Don't feel like, oh my God, all of these things are coming up. Don't wait, because in my link, in my bio, is my website or my inbox. Inbox me. Everything from starting that consultation, readings, all of my services in that space, it's all available to you. This is about ultimately opening up a new space, opening up that space. There's so many things that I've even heard going down my path and in my journey and in my work of that aspect of men don't have spaces to heal. Women don't have, like, women, the modalities are always geared towards women, or even in the aspects of sometimes, let's be honest. Let's be honest. If you have issues or a wound with let's say you have issues with women. Let's say that aspect. So you're sitting in that space with yourself and you're like, you know what? I can't get along with women. And you have those mother wounds or those wounds from the aspects of the cycles that you're trying to break of the transgenerational curses from the aspects with your mothers and your mother's mother and your grandmothers. Maybe you might need to have a different type of conversation. It's kind of hard to have that conversation face to face with a woman. That's what I do. For the fellas, for the brothers, this is the chance for you to actually sit inside of a space, and the importance of therapy and understanding that until you understand the psychological aspect or the shadow, everything you're going to do is going to be in a fear-based state. That fear-based state, that survival mode narrative, is going to leave you in the infatuation, or what is called lust. The infatuation. Lust comes before love. Lust comes before love. That lusting. But there's a difference between lust and intimacy. Lust, in a simplest way of terms, is please see me. Think about lust being please see me. Please see me be a good woman. Please see me be a good brother. Please see me be this good person. Please validate me. As opposed to that states of avoidance. Please validate me so I can avoid the things that I don't want to really work on. I want to avoid dealing with my shadow. I want to avoid dealing with it. I'm going to break down the aspects of these shadows. The aspects of I'm breaking down that shadow. Versus into me I see is the state of acceptance. One of the biggest things that we come into that space of, we're going to start with this example. How many times have you sat there and said, I'm tired of attracting this same type of people in my life? I'm tired of attracting the same types of people in my life. And every time that I attract or I bring it, I seem to be in alignment with the right people. I don't know how to capitalize inside of that space. That's because you're still operating in that lust mentality. You're still operating in that lust modality. There's 5 states of intimacy. There's 5 states of intimacy we're going to get into tonight. But in everything that we do in the aspects in a state of duality, there's also the 5 states of lust. There's 5 states of lust. There's more states, but these are the 5. We're going to deal with the 5. We're going to deal with the 5 heads: spiritual intimacy, mental intimacy, or intelligent intimacy, emotional intimacy, experimental intimacy, and physical intimacy, versus spiritual lust, emotional lust, intellectual lust, romanticism, emotional lust, expectational lust, expectational lust. That means you set things based on those expectations. Physical lust. I got a lot of notes. I'm gonna go down the list, and we're gonna attack. We're gonna get into each one. I'm gonna build out. Whenever I do my lives, if you're not familiar how I do lives, my lectures, I build it out so in the teaching imprint, because I know everybody doesn't learn the same. Some people are auditory, some people need visuals, some people can actually need to feel it. So how I break down my lesson, how I break down these lessons in these lives is a general scape so you can tap in to which one of those points. And if you want to go further, that's what those sessions are about. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Try to hold your question. If you have a question, write it down. Get a paper, write it down, and then hold it to the end. Because I might answer your question while we're speaking. But let's get into this. Last week I ended with purpose. Thinking about the aspects of moving inside of your purpose. The structure, the standard. Once you develop the standard, you set your intentions based on your standards. Once you set your intentions based on your standards. Once you set your intentions, then based in the actual structuring around maintaining and maintaining those standards, reinforcing those boundaries. The structure becomes those boundaries. And that's what creates that state of stability. The only things that get tested when you're going into the space, when you're actively doing your healing, actively doing that, building your space out, is your whole stability is the stability is temporary. The structure is temporary. The standard is temporary. The standard is temporary based in the aspects of I always can adjust my standards. I always can adjust my standards because my standards are in the state of this. When we look at the standard, are my standards based on an intimate aspect of myself? Or are my standards based in that lusting or please see me in the aspects of my results? Think about it like this. Every time you set your standard, you done got your life together, you doing all these things. Why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? If you can, one of the simplest things that I've learned is if I can put something after because, if I can put something after for, FOR, or I put something after word because, I'm doing this because of, I'm doing this for, I'm operating in lust. I'm operating to be seen. I'm operating to avoid. I'm operating to conform. I'm operating to conform. I'm operating based on an expectation. I'm operating based on conditions. But when I go into that state with myself, and now in the state of that love state, we talked about the love state and the fear-based state. When I'm moving in that love-based state, I'm doing this as me, as this represents the authentic me. I'm doing this as, so I'm putting that as. I'm doing this as the representation of me becoming. So I'm doing this work. I'm doing this work as to become, and use that example as an ancestor. I'm doing this work as if I'm coming back as one of my grandchildren, as one of my grandchildren, as one of my niece's children, as one of my nephew's children, as the next level's children. See, that as if leaves you in a state of naturally going from nothing to nothing, nothing to something to nothing again. The lusting state, the infatuation state, the expectational state, it always leaves you in a state of, I'm doing this for this. So think about it like this. If I'm doing things to be if I'm doing things because I want to be happy, that means the things that I'm doing, when they get taken away, I'm no longer happy. My subconscious is going to say, I'm no longer happy. But if I sit, that's the context. But if I sit with the feelings that come up after me being in that space, I realize that I have not yet defined happiness within inside of myself. I have not yet defined that peace within inside of myself. I'm still trying to find it. And this leads into the aspects of the top tier, that fifth element, that spiritual, that soul element, your soul aspect, your soul purpose of spiritual lust versus spiritual love. See, spiritual lust is based on the external or the perception. Spiritual lust is based on the persuasion or convincing. I'm always trying to convince. I'm trying to convince. Am I conveying a message, or am I trying to convince or persuade somebody by convoluting my the emotions and everything that comes up to deliver that message? Which one am I doing inside of that state? As opposed, when we come into the aspects of spiritual intimacy, we understand that inner self aspect or that perspective. Tapping in and listening to the aspects of our perspective. This is when we think about the aspects of listening to your intuition. Think about one of the simplest things about your intuition. Your intuition will always take you outside of your comfort zone. Always. Your intuition will never keep you inside of comfort. Your intuition is designed to take you outside of your comfort zone. So if every time you have a feeling, when you having that feeling inside of your mind of what you shouldn't do, and you feel like you allow that undisciplined aspect of yourself to come up to the surface, and now you trying to fight it or go against it, you know your intuition take you outside of your comfort zone, but now that's outside of your comfort zone is all of the emotional aspects you ain't dealt with yet, building out that space, assessing your standard, setting what is my structure's about to fall apart, my stability, I've been stable in this. This when we think about what a trauma response is. That trauma response is based on staying linked into that pattern. That synopsis of that link into that pattern. I got to stay linked into this pattern. I've done this for so long, so I have not learned to create a new space. I've only learned how to reassimilate or emulate inside of this space. I'm taking something to try to make something. I'm trying to take something and make it to something so I don't lose nothing. In the aspects of the infatuation, when we think about a relationship, in the beginning of a relationship, in the aspects of through a lust, that lust aspect, that first 6 to 8 months, where we get this aspect that's the honeymoon phase, and once that ends, but during the honeymoon phase, that's the courting phase. What we have become used to, what we've engineered and what we've given to ourselves, we'll call the courting phase. We'll call what is actually the courting phase the honeymoon phase. We call the courting phase the honeymoon phase. So you don't go through the courting stage. Think about what the courting stage is. The courting stage is learning. The courting stage is assessing these 5 points of the 5 points of that intimacy. Really getting to understand, like the simplest way that I put it when I think about the aspects of courting. Learning through availability. That means before you go and change out your whole schedule, move across the country, move across the state, all of these things, and now you're trying to make this person fit into your life because you've been waiting for this the entire time because you haven't built out a space for that, a space held for that. You're sitting inside of that space, learning. All right, cool. Live resumed. All right, cool. So when we're going into this aspects of that space, that courting space is based on my true availability. That means my availability based on my standard. My standards that have set the tone for my availability. Not only in the spiritual sense. In the spiritual sense, where are you at? In the spiritual sense, where you at? Are you in the lusting? Are you in the lusting phase of spirituality? That means every new crystal, every full moon ritual, every new full moon ritual, you can't wait to shit. You can't wait to share it because your aspect of sharing is based on persuading somebody to accept this new aspect of you that you haven't fully developed yourself in. Or is it in aspects, when we think about the aspects of spiritual love, the spiritual love as intimacy, where we're maintaining and we're learning the development and the reestablishment of our discipline. Use an example. I always use myself as an example because I'm using the best as an example. Let's say, for the example, I'm up at 4:30 Monday through Friday. Between 4 and 4:30, I'm up. I'm up at 4:30. Up at 4:30. Meditation, scan, do a nice little scan, healing scan over myself. Meditation, do a couple push-ups, go for my run. Either I'm going for a run, either I'm going for a full run and doing my workout in my run, squats, push-ups, lunges, all that good shit, or I'm running to the gym. Either way, I'm running to something. I have a discipline or a purpose, a standard set to the structure that I'm about to go into that's going to bring me that's going to reflect the stability that my standard is set on. So think about that aspect. So I'm up at 4:30. I'm up at 4:30. It will not be until about 8. It won't be until about 8:30 till I'm back at the house. From there, from there for me, from there for me, I'm looking at either I have created some stuff from last night, and I'm gonna go into the aspects of that. I've created something last night, whether it's videos, whether I put together some videos, some clip edits from previous content that I've created, or I created. If you look on my channel, y'all know. You look on my channel, you see those different my video ad like pictures where I put like, ooh, what is this? What's the aspects I'm avoiding? What's that, like things of that nature? Putting that stuff together. Take my shower. That's my routine. Take my shower. Now I'm taking my shower, drinking my tea, checking out my appointment log. I have all of these things lined up that match my daily discipline. So inside of that space, here's the key. To set that space, that sounds oh my God, that sounds easy. But I had to build that out. Because before that, there was other things in place that served that served to ultimately help me hone my standard, to hone my stability, to give me a sense of stability, to give me a sense of stability inside of my life. Before that, before that 2020, had a whole job. Had the whole job working in a restaurant. So the restaurant took the place of me waking up early in the AM was my job. I was waking up for my job. The reason that I wake up is for my job. The reason I'm waking up, the reason I go to my job is because I needed that money. But I'm not looking at it energetically. See, the aspect of you getting intimate with yourself is looking at things from that energetic space. This is the aspect when you come into the aspects of understanding the necessity of that work, that shadow work, that healing work. Of let me look at where I'm at in my spiritual sense, because I'm going. When I was first coming into my shit, I thought I was the same energy that I used to get my jobs, that I was working the jobs, making the money, in the relationship, friendships, everything that I had inside of that space, the same aspects that I was sitting there doing, same energy, the same energetic motion, the same unresolved trauma, the same unresolved aspects I was putting into my spirituality. I was putting into my consciousness. I became aware, but I was not taking the accountability in what I was becoming aware of, what I needed to become aware of. I was becoming aware of what was the accessory. So when it came into that spiritual sense, it was in the sense of lusting, it was trying to convince, persuade that this is me. So you go through all of the cycles. Think about it. You became vegan, you sitting here. But all of these aspects, remember, intimacy is making these things become practical and natural in that flow of that motion. It's becoming natural in the flow of that motion. It's not sitting there inside of that space and saying, because you have crystals and because there's a full moon, that I have to be shit. I'm getting intrusive thoughts and things like that. We don't get deeper. We don't get into that in the mental aspect. I'm having all these intrusive thoughts and the energies coming at me all types of way. You got to remember this. Things can only hit you one or two ways. Either the room was already present, or you invited it in. So now think about that. You coming into your spiritual sense. Oh my God, I'm going to call all my energy back to me. I did it. I'm going to call all of my energy back to me. Anybody that's pulling from my energy, using my energy, is taking my energy without my consent, I'm calling all of my energy back to me. So then all of a sudden, what about the physical space? What about the physical space? Remember, as above, so below. What about the physical space? You called all your energy back to you. All that energy you didn't put out, so you're constantly emitting energy. So, and if you're not checking your emotions in the physical state, the psychological aspect, then of course you don't know what that energy. So this is when you're thinking you're getting the spiritual and psychic. You think you're getting attacked, but you call forth that attack to yourself. You lit up like a fucking Christmas tree when you called all of your energy back to you. You don't even know how to cloak. You don't even know how to cloak yourself or hide yourself inside of that space. But no, you don't even know how to hide you don't even know how to mask your energy. You don't know how to transmute. So now you're constantly pulling in all of this energy. But remember, the biggest thing about the universe, highest universe, whatever you want to call it, it's only going to meet you exactly where you are at. Energetically, it's going to meet you where you are at. It's not going to meet you where you're trying to become, because you haven't become that yet. Your becoming is in that future tense. Playing out. That your future you's playing out. Your future, the alternate versions of the future, your future self, of your becoming, is playing out in all its alternate realities. It's playing out in all its alternate realities. And in the present, what you're trying to call your energy to this present state is based on, you have to ask yourself the question, is this based on a void? I'm tired of being alone. I'm tired of being hurt. I'm tired of being misunderstood. What are you saying inside of the present state? Because that's where your energy, you're pulling your energy to there. One of the things that I always break down is, as long as I'm not, whenever you're triggered, you're not emotionally present. Whenever you get triggered, it's letting you know that I'm not present there. I am not present with those emotions. And my reaction is my reaction is similar to if you've seen the apps for like earning and those earning and Albert and Date, all those apps that you can go grab your money, you can work the hours now, get the money now, and then when you get paid, they take it out of that. That's you literally robbing your future becoming and paying off to your past. So that past relationship, all the past relationships, friendships, all those things that you feel that you still have guilt about, you still trying to pay those off. That's staying in that state of lust. that stayed in that state of condition. As long as I'm staying in a state of condition, I can't, all I can do is emulate based on the conditions that I've set. All I can do is emulate based off the conditions that have already been set. Therefore, all I can do is acquire more. All I'm doing is acquiring more and more karmic. All I'm doing is adding on debt, karmic debt, with interest. Think about it like a credit card. You get a credit card with a $300 limit to it. In reality, you don't even have a full $300 on that card. You got that card, and you blow, okay, cool. But you have no way to refurbish. You have no way to put the energy back to that because you haven't built it out yet. You're getting this so easy. It becomes so easy to get it because it's an infatuation. And now you're getting stimulated. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to get a bunch of these things. And then you slip into that mental space of that context. I said if once I had the money, I was going to do this, 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 and this, and this. Here's the thing. If I'm always inside of that state, then it's never going to be enough. Staying in that state of lusting, that state of condition, that state of survival, remember, it's never going to be enough. It's never going to be enough. Like, why would it be enough? How could it be enough? It only can fill up a certain space. So this is when we slip into the aspects of that mental capacity. So now go back to my example. Before that state, everything had to be questioned. From how I was living to how I was moving. I couldn't keep moving the same exact way. Because the way that I was moving before was not the way that the version of me that I was becoming. I can't visualize. The reason a lot of times people get messed up, you can't visualize the person that you're trying to become. Every time, think about the person you're trying to become, visualize them. What do they smell like, look like, activate all of those senses. What are they doing? What are they thinking about? How do they move? Start thinking as they would think. Start speaking as they would speak. Start moving how they would move in their responses. It's hard to even start that part of the process. That when every time that process comes up, when I'm triggered, I'm reacting. So my reaction is augmenting the way the version of myself that I see myself becoming. It becomes more physical. This is when remember the energy's constantly cycling. This is when it becomes more physical. This is when the person that you're becoming comes as somebody else. It comes as that friend. It comes in the form of the job. It manifests itself in different ways in order for you to learn it. It comes to you in those different ways as that new lesson plan. But if I'm not actively stating to myself in that state of lust, when these things come into my space and it trickles down into the mental form, the conversations become cognitive. Yep. They become cognitive. Let me look at this, make sure I got that right. Yep. Cognitive. Yeah. They become cognitive. They become me seeking something to convolute something. Think about it. Think about that aspect when that you heard that one. Think about it like this. Every time you were listening to certain people at a certain point in time, the main thing that had you triggered in listening to certain people was because they gave you certain buzzwords. You fell for natal chart. You fell for natal chart. You fell for karmic debt. You fell for ancestors. You fell for you were intrigued and infatuated with somebody talking about giving love to the ancestors. You were infatuated with those things. So you fell for those buzzwords. And then as your infatuation started to dissipate, that's when that synapses triggers, And then you're worried about how it's supposed to become, what it's supposed to become, what it's supposed to look like, how it's supposed to become, how it's supposed to come out in that space. And you sitting there, and then all of a sudden now, what are you projecting into that space? Conditions. The conditions of unresolved insecurity. The conditions of the unresolved frustration. The conditions of unresolved shame and guilt. The conditions of basically when we come in that state of apathy versus empathy. Empathy is the state of learning how to transmute and have the state of compassion with one's emotions, and apathy is losing interest. So every conversation that you have inside of that space is based on you trying to maintain a certain level of interest. They can't see me, so I have to convolute it. I'm a free spirit. So you fell for that word. I'm a free spirit. I do what I want when I want. I'm a free spirit. I can't be contained. All you're doing is telling your subconscious, okay, we do not contain or regulate it. Containment is based on regulation. So we do not regulate our emotions. This is true. Your subconscious goes to the traumatic point of where you have still not regulated that traumatic experience. You still have not sat with that emotional point, that shadow aspect of yourself. So yeah, you haven't regulated. So what comes to the front? What comes to the forefront? That shadow. That shadow comes to the front. That shadow that you developed to mask your insecurity. That shadow that you developed to mask shame. So now when you come into the physical state, instead of actually being adventurous, that means in the state of trying new things and aspects to expand your space and to develop new spaces and new experience and that new containment, you're becoming reckless. You go into a state of recklessness. That means when you go into that physical state, when it's based on physical lust, in the aspect, when we think about in the physical state, we think about the way I simplified it is coddling versus cuddling. The cuddle. Cuddle is to hold, to charge, that we understand when we touch certain parts of the body, you hold somebody, you're transmitting, you're transmuting energy. But if I'm in a state of coddling, that means I want somebody to hold me because of my shame. I want somebody to see me and please see me as, yes, I do have shames. I do feel guilt. I do feel insecure about myself. Please accept me as this. Please accept me as this so I don't have to sit with it alone. I don't want to sit alone with that. This is when you have most of these you think about most of your earlier relationships, all based in the aspects of trauma bonding. Every aspect of experience was only based on setting expectations. I don't do this and I don't do this and I don't. So then naturally it evolved and it devolves into the sense of I don't do this. I don't do that. I do this. I might do this. You got to be this to get this. And then now you have a whole list of expectations. As long as you got those expectations in play, you never have to assess your standard. Because in order for you to assess your standard, the only person that you have expectations on is myself. Only person I'm putting expectations on is me. My expectations are based in my aspects of my standard. Those are for me to operate in for my boundaries. That's for me to have clear and direct boundaries. When you're heavily dependent on, well, you have to be this and you got to be doing this and you got to be doing this. That shows that's an indirect action, or you having a lack of boundaries, or your boundaries are you don't have a clear understanding even of your own boundaries. Because now this when we come into that exception state. Well, he can do this or she can do this, so they can get a pass on that part. Where did you learn that from? That's because subconsciously The way that you have given yourself this thought process of accepting your mother, accepting your father, accepting that wound as it is, and you only went a little bit in there just to get a little bit of awareness of it. Now you're projecting it into your space. Who am I to judge someone? Who am I to judge somebody? Everybody's going through things. So now, in the state of that connection, when we come into the emotional state, we're going to go through all of these. When we go through that emotional lust, we step into that emotional lusting state. It's a state of grooming. You're communicating to groom. Think about how many times you sat there and said inside of a conversation with somebody, well, I didn't want to say that because I didn't know how you would react to it. Based on their reaction to that, that's grooming. That's grooming. After you've done enough of that, after you've done enough of that and you've now relit that flame of infatuation, oh my God, they accept me. They accept me. Now the 8 months then went by, the year, now you're at that month 9, the honeymoon phase is over, and then they bring that back up. Why would you bring that up? I told you that. Why did you tell them that? Were you trying to convey or were you trying to convince? Were you trying to convey I've been through this and I'm still working on this? This is one of the things that I'm working on when it comes to my insecurity? Or were you trying to convince them in that space? I've been through a lot. I just want somebody that doesn't give up on me. You're signaling to now think about what you're telling your subconscious. Instant that state, when we go back to the mental space, you're looking for stimulation. Because as soon as somebody says, I won't give up on you as long as you don't give up on me. Now you're stuck in that state of that stimulation. Now the undisciplined state of self, that lust to keep that infatuation, to keep that lusting momentum going, you're going to keep testing it. That's why in most relationships that's why when we think about it from the aspects of, let's say it boils down to you have the anxious or the fearful avoidance style. And now you're going to test that. From the anxious aspect, you're going to test that and you're going to put expectations. You're going to see how far you can push it. The anxious to fear avoiding aspect, you're never fully in the space. You're never fully present. You're never fully present emotionally. You're never fully present. You're never fully present in a spiritual state. You're never fully present inside of that space. You're never fully present. You're there, but you're not all there. Because you've learned to compartmentalize. This when we think about compartmentalization. You didn't learn to compartmentalize. You don't expect. So now inside of that space, the only way that you remove a compartment is this person lives up to that expectation. So now you're going to test them based on that expectation. You have a whole council of whether it's a whole count, let's say, whether you have a whole council of women, chicks, your sisterhood that you talk to, your whole brotherhood you talk to, or you got a homegirl that you talk to about all of you, and you got them all compartmentalized. And you'll keep those people inside of those spaces. You'll keep those people inside of those spaces ultimately until this person, this place, this person shows and can adapt to your behavior of that space. So you're never fully in that space. So now you're sitting in that space and you're like, think about it like, you're thinking about it like this. I can't talk to you about all of these things. Because every time I talk to you, I feel like you're judging me. Ask yourself a real question. Why would you allow yourself into a space? I mean, it's all about capacity. It's all about understanding this. When we come into that aspect of developing that emotional space, is developing true trust and understanding what trust truly is. Trust is based on capacity and ability. And if I'm inside it, when we go back to that courting stage, I have to test the capacities and the ability, my capacity and my ability of myself first. So let's go back to that example where I was building on in the aspects of me shifting from 9 to 5 to what I call that LLC mentality. I'm shifting from the 9 to 5 and coming into that LLC mentality. Now I'm in the LLC mentality. I'm shifting into that. I don't know what ownership is. I don't know what accountability is. I have an idea. I have a biased about what it is. Even when I take accountability, I'm saying, well, I'm not going to take the blame for everything. That's triggering cognitive bias. That's triggering that cognitive. I'm not going to take the blame for everything. Who said you had to? That's the defensive dialogue. That's traumatic. That's defensive dialogue that lives in the state of that traumatic response versus you sitting there and being able to sit in that space and say, hey, I actively take assessment of my actions. I take active assessments of my actions, my behaviors, my patterns. I've sought counsel, or I've sought counseling, therapy, coaching in the aspects of these elements where I needed it. And I can see that it is now, since I'm taking this new action, now I see that inside of my space, the people that I used to use based on tell me something before you go to your homegirl, you go to your homeboy, you go to your friend, you go to these other people, they have their own cognitive biases because you compartmentalized it that way. They have their own bias. You go to your home, like use the example of why would you ask single? We talk about it all the time. Why would I ask my single friend about a relationship? Why would I ask my friend or this person, my associate, that only has the ability and the capacity to their views on relationships? They only have the ability to understand and perceive based on their aspects of relationships. That's where I'm gonna get that. That's the type that I have to accept that response. They give me the same response, break up with him. They give me the same response, break up with her. They give the same response, man, do what they did to you. Make them feel that shit. They give you the same damn responses. And since you don't have the conversation with yourself, you're not used to that. You're thinking that, okay, cool, they have my best interest. You got to think about it like this, to the aspects of that purpose with yourself. And we talked about purpose last week. My primary goal, my primary purpose is myself. My primary aspect in my purpose is myself. So why would I not think somebody else would think that way? So this is when you get triggered. You always thinking about yourself. Wait, this person is showing me to think about myself. What do I think about myself? Why am I triggered? Why am I triggered by this person thinking about themselves? Why am I triggered by this person thinking about themselves? They're putting themselves first. They're creating a plan, creating their standards, and structuring a new stability. This when we get into the aspect, that one little key aspect. A lot of times, because we're used to recognition, we want to be accepted. Please see me, please see me, please see me, please see me for my achievements and what I've done. The problem is, in the simplest term, Remember, love and fear can't operate in the same space. So if I develop the skill set out of fear, I developed the skill set out of fear. I developed that skill set out of survival and fear. Whole skill set out of survival and fear. That means I'm always looking for the external to persuade that my skill set is valid. So now you'll sit there and you'll do everything for something. You'll do all of these things. I did this. I do this for you. I do this. I do this. I do all of these things for all of these people. But if one person looks you dead in your face and says, I never asked you for any of that, what did they ask for? What conversation did you guys have? Since when we get into the aspects of that expectation, get into the expectation. You're sharing your experiences to bond versus to learn. You're sharing your experiences of your trauma. You're dumping your wounds. You're dumping these emotional catalysts, the last relationship, friendships, how your job treats you. You dumping all of these things into that space for this person to bond to you. But what happens when that person asks you a simple question? So what do you really don't like your job? And I can feel you on that. Yeah, like, but if you could right now leave your job right now, what has your job taught you? What skills from your job? What skills from that space? What skills from that job have you acquired that you can actually take and apply somewhere else? Can you apply anything that you're doing over there? How can you replicate and apply that in some other space inside of your life? How do you do it? Can you answer that question? That's mental substance. That's the mental substance. That's the learning aspect. Because one of the biggest things that I learned was the only time I could get upset at somebody or upset with somebody, mad, upset that people were doing other things and they didn't want to do shit with me is because I didn't have anything on my I didn't have any purpose. See, when I went into that space as the wounded masculine aspect of myself, I went into that space of since I had no purpose, they became my purpose. Since I did not hold myself at top priority, they became my priority. Their feelings, their emotions, their spiritual aspects. That means their opinions and their beliefs became authority over me, became a part of me. Their mental aspects, stimulating their mental. That means keeping myself on their mind. That means constantly saying, I miss you, I miss you, I miss you. I was thinking about you. That emotional context came into mind. That emotional lust came into mind. What was I saying about emotional lust again? That state of apathy. That means I had this constant fear of them losing interest in me. So I had to keep them emotionally at all costs. And since I only can emulate, I cannot facilitate and create new emotional spaces because I'm still stuck in emotional voids. I had to keep them in a state of being interested in me. So it was easy to share my problems. Man, work did this, and my friend did this, and my mom did this, and my pops did this, or these people did this to me. It was easy to share those things. But since energetically they were attuned to that, they could not be, they didn't have they were giving me the capacity and the ability. They were showing me their level. I was defining their level of capacity and ability. So, of course, if I'm in a fear-based state, that restricted-based state, that lusting state, of course I can share of course it became cool to share an idea. But if they didn't give me the reaction that I needed to validate my idea, what would happen? Shit fall off. And even when I start working on something, it's only based on a physical imprint. So use the example. Use that. Just go into the example. 1 second. Oh, shit. Window open, door slam. It would, of course, for me, inside of that space, sharing an example, sharing an ideal, sharing an aspect. This is what I want to do. And this is what I want to do. How many times have you sat there in circles around people and you're like, this is what I want to do? And everybody gets excited. Yeah, we can do that because that's going to change the world and all of this thing. We hear that all the time in the conscious aspect. We can do all of these things, and with the world, we can change some things. But think about this. That's the infatuation. That's the infatuation. It's always, I'm about to do this, or I was doing this. So you haven't built it out yet. So a lot of times we're going into these spaces in this example, go back to the example. When I first started in the building process, see, I had to get past it. I had to go through the healing process before I even got into my new building process. So a lot of my standards were based in healing, elevating my standard. A lot of my standards were my structure was based in healing, reestablishing myself. Who am I? Going through the many different layers of who am I? Learning to sit with the context of, ooh, I'm a God, and sitting with that context and allowing that context to dissolve so I can actually sit with what kind of God am I? What kind of Titan am I? Ooh, I love my ancestors. Do all of my ancestors love me? Do all of my ancestors some of my ancestors didn't operate just like in your physical world? You got family members that are still operating in survival. Friends, family members, all these people that you bonded with that are operating in survival. You got on the other side, the reason that they can exist is because in the spiritual space, there's still people that are operating in survival. They're your opposition. So when we come back into that spiritual aspect. My beliefs, my opinions, and my belief system. Getting to the root of my belief system. This is when you grab information. When we talk about downloads, you gravitate towards certain information. For me, it was gravitating towards Voodoo and Santeria in the Congo, all of these different rites of passage that required me to all these aspects that came into the aspects of becoming that shaman state, and why was I attracted to it? See, the key of you coming into that space is once you sit with that infatuation or the initial attraction is defining your why. But in order for me to define the why of me becoming, I got to define the original why. I got to sit back with the original why. Why didn't everybody? So this when you go down your family history, and oh damn, that's why my grandma woke up at 4:00 in the a.m. That's why I never saw my grandfather drunk. That's why I never saw my uncles a certain way. By the time the daylight came, they were either asleep or they were acting right. Because my grandmother was sitting with them. My grandmother had control over that space. So there's a lot of things that I didn't know that had to come up first for me to relearn and reestablish that connection, the true connection to my grandmother, the true connection to that ancestor and that family member. The reason that in the earlier parts of my spirituality, a lot of my shit was flying and fluctuating and going real fast. Then I hit a plateau, and I thought I'm hitting a wall, is because that person only could go that far. I didn't open that space up. In this state of infatuation and that infatuation of lust, you gonna build out something to a certain point, but you got to remember, you got to build it out. It was already from the traumatic state, the traumatic experiences. You only can build out to a certain point. You want an example of that? Go on YouTube right now, and you still got the same dudes arguing on the corner, and you got the same people dropping the same Bobby Hemmett and videos over and over, clips from videos over and over again. And then on top of that, now they're just grafting over that, and now they're still stuck with the inside of trends because they haven't went deep enough with themselves. They're still opposed to dealing with themselves. See, when I was sitting inside of that space, the biggest thing that was hitting me is I was opposed to dealing with myself. So the same, as I said earlier, the same way, the same energy that I took in from the traumatic experience naturally became a state of replacing. This is the aspects when you coming into that space of that expectational, not experimental. You got an expectation when you go into that space. How many times have you sat there and put something on an altar at a certain point in time, and you wanted a certain result to happen, and when that result didn't happen, you said it didn't work. You did that whole abundance ritual, full moon ritual, and then you said it didn't work. You did this whole ritual under the full moon. Please, Mother Luna, goddess of the moon, could you remove anybody out of my life? Can you remove anybody out of my life that's not meant for serve me my greater purpose? But you forgot. There's along with all of those people, along with all of those entities, those energies, those catalysts, there is a version of you that has to be removed as well. I remember I was in a relationship at that point in time. And I remember when my now, like, of course, ex, she went into that space, and it was her first time did her first letter and everything, and she walked outside. And then that's when her apathy rose, her loss of interest. So she found herself not being able to feel inside of that space. Because what I was designed for inside of that space and my capacity and my ability, and we have to be honest with ourselves inside of that space, at before, where I was inside of relationships where I was the karmic one. I was the one that needed the lesson from that karmic space. That means that relationship, that friendship that I was in, I was the one that needed to learn those lessons. Now I was the reflective one. I was the reflective one. I was the one showing her herself. So when she went out and did that releasing ritual, and then she noticed that she got into that real space and she lost interest, like her apathy started showing, and how she developed her trying to keep things interested inside of a certain space, and certain things weren't working, and that separation started happening. Me sitting in this space from a healed space now, I'm going to give you an example before, of a healed space now, as the separation started occurring, I waited. This is me learning. My lesson was learning patience. Used to be impatient as hell. Used to be impatient as fuck. That means I couldn't wait to analyze, tell somebody what it was. Well, this and this and this and this and this. I couldn't wait to emulate my father. Couldn't wait to emulate my pops. Couldn't wait to emulate my uncles. I couldn't wait to emulate. I couldn't wait to give access to the spirit in its lesser state, because I was in a lesser state. Lesser state spirits work in the lesser states. So my lesser state spirits giving me my information, pops in my ear, uncles in my ear, cousins in my ear, friends that I watched die from not taking fucking accountability for their lives were in my ear, telling me all those things. Tell her how you feel, Los. Tell her how you feel. Tell her how you feel, Los. Tell her how you feel, Los. So now I'm in a state of over analyzing. But this was the lesson key in that space. Learning patience inside of that space is what helped me step back into a space to where I learned analyzation. I've talked about this in lectures that are my past lectures, in the aspects of how I came into learning psychology, coming into the psychological aspects. Went to school for it. I wanted to really see it inside of my head. I wanted to do something in that space. I made the whole joke about it when I sat inside of that space, and I was like, my uncle said, and my uncle basically told me, like, so you're basically you're gonna be a legalized pimp, because you're going to school for business and you're going to school for psychology. So you're gonna learn how to work people's heads for the money. And honestly, yes, that's what I was doing, because that's honestly how I used it. So I used my analytical nature in my lower self. It was always active. I was always abundant in my analytical nature, the resource. But since it was based in fear, I only can use it in fear-based states. I only can use it in high conflict situations. So I made myself very, very, very good at being able to talk myself out of high conflict situations. Made it very, very good. Not de-escalate the situation, but being able not to have to go there. So now I'm going through but this is what comes up. Anger, shame, guilt, all those things come up. But inside of this space, I was learning patience. So instead of the natural, please see me, please see me, please see me listening to you, please see me accepting you, please see me listening to you, I could sit back. So when they dumped, now, since I'm learning the difference between judgment of dumping and the discernment of venting in that space, so now I can sit back and listen. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Waiting for the chance to respond. This also, when you get into the aspects of when we come into the aspects of your human design. My design is to respond, to impact and respond. My responses will bring an impact. So now, naturally, inside of that space, she's having this. They're having whether it's her, whoever's having this whole argument, this whole dialogue, ultimately with their inner self. Instead of me reacting to be indirect, to convolute, to persuade, to infatuate, to stimulate, being dismissive, I'm learning the lessons of dismissive tones. Someone telling me I'm not listening to them. Someone telling me I'm not listening to them is just as dismissive as somebody saying that you're calling me crazy. This falls in the same equivalent of somebody calling me crazy. It's a dismissive tone. You're not listening to me. So instead of reacting like I used to, I would repeat, well, you said this, and you said this, and you said this. And then you said this. I'm listening, I'm allowing this space to be open and allowing you to speak. Oh, are you not used to that? Not really. So now we start getting to the root of the issue. Now we start getting to the root. Now we start looking at the pattern. Now we start learning the pattern. Now we start learning the behavior. Now we start getting to the aspects of the events that they're connected to. Because now I'm sitting in patience. They're showing me everything that I need to see and everything that I'm now in a state of observing. As opposed to before, they're trying to be heard. I'm feeling some type of way that they're saying these things. And since I'm feeling some type of way and I don't know how to trace these roots back to myself, I'm listening to the words that they're saying, trying to bond, stay within that bond. So now I'm going to react a certain way to get a certain response. So now I'm going to argue and yell. I don't argue. I'm not going to argue. That's the not self of me. Frustration is a not self aspect of me. So if I'm in a state of frustration, remember what I've said, where I'm triggered is where I'm not present. So now I'm learning inside of that space. I'm not present. This person telling me that I'm not listening to them. Where am I? Where is this rooted inside of me? Where is this rooted with me? Because once I learned that root, I learned how I energetically connected to this person. Now I see that my own issues with my father were the reason that I attracted certain women. My issues with my mother is why I aligned and attracted only a certain level of a certain brotherhood. So I'm seeing what I'm attracting. And all of these are giving me the same exact feeling, that infatuation of being accepted. I can't wait to share. Carlos sitting there, he can't wait to share what he learned at school. He can't wait to share what he learned at school, but when he gets home, everybody's so busy, no one's paying attention to him, so he can't share it. So he developed the system that during the summertime, when he was little, he developed the sense of, let's play school. See, if I become the teacher, they're going to have to listen to me in my classroom. So now I'm playing school. So they have to listen to me because I know something. So now I develop this lust or this insatiable want and need or this possessiveness based on having information. So now that I got this level of information, now every time that I get information, I'm scattered. Since I have since I've categorized my life, I got everything in categories, certain information goes to certain people. So now that I've built out this space based on that, and I've populated my entire space on that, I'm avoiding myself. I'm no longer a priority. I have no purpose. I'm constantly going to seek that distraction. Because that's my being reckless. You only live once. Your life is too short. Don't waste your life. But in reality, when people are saying that, they're saying don't waste the existence. Live in that moment. If I'm not living if I'm not living with my own, if I've not learned to live with my own shadows, how can I live in a moment? How can I capitalize on living inside of a moment? When my skill set does not, my trust in myself, the capacity of myself does not warrant that. So now I look at those instances inside of my life where things didn't work. And where things didn't work and I thought it was the worst thing ever, those things were the aspects that were saving me. And the things that seemed to be so easy that were happening, some of those were actually my distractions. Because I got stuck on, this works and that works and this works. And since this works and this works and this works, I'm going to keep doing these things unconsciously allow my space to populate it based on these things. But every time that everything starts to fucking shut down, COVID-19, my stability is now falling apart. My structure is now falling apart. The structure of that, the stability based on survival, my structure based on survival, and my whole standard based on survival is now falling apart. Think about instances. Friend transitions, mother transitions, child transitions, all those transition points. I done read 75 fucking books, listened to 16 different fucking lectures telling me that death is a transitional point. But since I only did it based on romanticism, I was not able to, since I did that shit on romanticism, when the stimulation came up of the death, I couldn't accept it for what it was because I couldn't, if I release them, from their human narrative and what happened to them, this is when you get into that space. They went away too soon and their life was all of this. They did look this. I tell my clients all the time, look at what they did. What did they inspire for you? What did they bring to the surface about you? What did you notice about them? Those are the elements that they're meant to teach you. That's what they were meant. That's what they were there to teach you. If anybody understands anything about the aspects of teaching, coaching, anything of these natures, or when we just think about things in aspects of Black people, and just looking at that instance, if it's not in my face, that means if I do not have to invest into it, I'm not really gonna do it. It sounds good. I'm gonna do this with my life, and I'm gonna start working out. Okay. Mm-hmm. You'll start working out, but it's a replacement. It's a replacement. You're gonna start going to the gym and working out because it's a replacement for something. You must replace something with it. But you haven't went through the process of, okay, let me use an example of fasting. And the simplest thing put is, if I can't go 72 hours without something, it's attached to something deeper. I must sit with it. So you'll go to the gym. You'll go to the gym on that impulse. You'll go work out on that impulse. You'll go to the gym on an impulse, and you'll remain as long as that impulse is strong. As long as the elements that populate that space keep you within that impulse. You'll study, you'll read, you'll listen, you'll read, you'll do all of those things. But when it gets to that point to where it's time to shift over, okay, cool. I've studied this, I've studied this, I've studied this, I've studied this. I've overloaded my space. I'm doing this based in, remember, I'm in fear. So I'm studying based in fear. So I'm studying based on the infatuation of this information. So until I can apply it naturally, the subconscious and the mind naturally is going to program that into the space where I do not see it to be practical, where I'm not willing to build something out. It cannot become practical. Therefore, it cannot become embedded or rooted. It has to mean something else. So the only reason I'm studying Black power and politics is because the white man did this. The only reason that I got this job and I'm trying to work, I'm trying to get myself together because I can't depend on anybody. I can't depend on anybody. I.e., so now I'm going to be codependent upon this job validating me. But remember, in lust, it's always a constant state of replacing. Physical lust is always in a constant state of replacing something. Expectational lust is always in a state of That expectational or that lusting and based on expectations is always based on replacing something. Damn, this guy can do this, so I'm going to keep him around. Damn, this chick can do this, so I'm going to keep them around. But now as that space starts to degenerate, that apathy kicks in, that loss of interest kicks in. Now you're going to try to give them an authority that they don't have the capacity for. They don't have the capacity for that. If I truly knew what discernment was and I started working in my discernment, I would have used that. I would have went through the process. But most times out of 10, because of the traumatic experience, where's your head stuck at in your traumatic experience? Stuck in the last time that it happened? Stuck in a state of comparison? You stuck in a state of comparison? So you only can compare. So you only comparing them to that person. You only comparing them to that place. Everything you're doing is going to be in a state of comparison and compartmentalizing based on the comparison. Well, they can't do all of this, but they can do this. So I'm going to keep them here in that space. But in order for me to keep something somewhere, I must stay energetically attuned to it. It's like the first time I ever told somebody was like, so you're saying like, don't put a spell on somebody? Don't put no spells on other people? Yeah. Why would you try to put any spell work or do any work to somebody, not realizing that the first key catalyst to any spell is not a lock of their hair or anything. It's an aspect of you must be presented first. That's just when we think about the basics of altar work. You're making them your altar to do your work that you're about to do, your sacrifice, whatever you're trying to do inside of that space. So, of course, you got to put a part of yourself in there first, energetically attached to it. And it sounds easy because you've been doing it. You just didn't realize you were doing it. So you're wondering why you keep attracting the same things into that space. Oh, my God. So now I look into the space, go back to my example. I'm actually waking up. Wait, I work in the AM. Okay, I work in the morning. Cool. I'm going to get up at 4:30. I'm going to get up at 4. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to get up at 4. I don't get off work until 11 or 12. I get to the house. Take a shower. It's 1 o'clock. I wake up at 4 o'clock. I'm so used to a certain pattern, and now Now I'm looking at this pattern. Now I'm sitting this pattern that I realize that the same way I'm approaching this now, before I see this pattern, that I'm approaching this thing the same way. I'm doing the same things. So now, instead of waking up at 4:30 and sitting with myself, instead of waking up at 7 and 8 and sitting and on my phone or trying to get some or things of that nature, I'm just trying to move those things into the 4:30 space. So when I wake up at 4:30, the first thing I grab is my phone. Facebook, Instagram, emails. What's my bank account look like? Oh, I got a bill I got to pay. I'm building out an identity. I'm building out based on my opinion of how I define myself in the spiritual space, in that spiritual space, based on the perception of what I need to be seen as, based on what's going to stimulate what I'm being, my perception, based on the emotions that I'm going to use and manipulate to maintain that identity, all these multiple identities in that side of that space, i.e. going to work. So now I'm going to use the expectations. Now, think about it. Now I'm going to work. niggas gotta make me mad at work. That means the motherfuckers the night before, legit, they always gotta suck. They always gotta not do something. They always gotta not close the open. The people before that, they gotta keep doing the same thing. Because that's what keeps my identity intact. It helps me get stimulated, get angry. So I ride that wave of anger, that infatuation, that lusting feeling, that longing for somebody to do their job right, that longing for this person to just act right one time. I'm going to ride that wave. But while I'm riding this wave, remember, when you're riding this wave in that metaphysical point, you're creating different points. You're always creating multiple different points from that point. So now, based on your urge and your vices, that recklessness in that physical space, stuck in your lower self. So you have a warped sense of confidence. You have a warped sense of confidence. You have a warped sense of creativity, which is actually so it becomes hypersexualized. And I've broken down how the aspects of sex is not, we're not talking about that aspect of physical. In the aspects of that physical. In the aspects of that physical form. Feel what I'm saying? So I'm implementing in that space or emulating inside of that space. So now, as I built out this space and is repopulated, now we get a new employee. Now we get a new employee. Or now we get a new employee I'm gonna train in the kitchen. Now we get that new chick that's coming in. She don't know nothing about that space. She new there. She about to get trained. So now I got a new element or a new control, because there's the constant in the experiment that in all of your experimentations, you're the constant. Then you have your controls. That person plays as the control. They're new. So they're going to see me a certain way. So all of this energy that I've worked up based on anger to try to be the fucking best, to beat on my chest inside of this space from a wounded space, to be accepted, now I'm going to use. Now I'm going to release. So when we think about the lusting state, it's always looking for a release. Staying in that state of lust or infatuation is staying in that state of trying to release. Release to depletion, then refill. When you come into that, that's the transmitting. When you come into that love aspect, the intimacy aspect, it's about learning how to cultivate and charge. Cultivation is the assessment. Charging is the acceptance of that assessment. What needs to be done and what needs to be done. What needs to be accepted. What do I need to become aware of? What do I need to acknowledge? What do I need to apologize to myself for? But in that lusting state, your awareness bypasses acknowledgement. It bypasses acknowledgement. It takes a lesser state of accountability. And then you come into the aspects of feeling sorry for yourself, feeling guilty, feeling insecure. That's how rejection gets activated. So now you wanted this person to see you. They didn't see you a certain way. You were trying to avoid your own rejection wound. They have to see me. Oh, I see what they like. I'm going to give them what they like. You're not learning them. You're grooming. If they react to this, then I'll keep doing this. If they react to this, then I'll keep doing this. They react to this, I'll keep doing this. They don't react to this, so I'll stop doing this. So now you go through a level, now you go through an aspect of shutting and depleting, shutting things down and keeping other things. So now you're shutting this down so the energy flows to that point. Thinking it's a different energy. So now you just shut off what feeds your guilt in this space and you put it into this space, and now that's going to feed your guilt. That's why when you had that conversation with them, you're naturally omitting certain things from the space. You're either overexpressive or you're underexpressive because you don't have discernment. You're overexpressive based on judgment, and you're underexpressive based on judgment. Your past judgment or the past relationship, the past friendship, where you weren't open and honest in the beginning about your life. Remember, honesty is based on comprehension. Do you comprehend why you wouldn't tell anybody that? Do you comprehend your guilt? Do you comprehend that insecurity with yourself? Because if you don't, you're going to project. What are you going to project into the space? I've never had anybody talk to me this way. I'm used to getting what I want because of what I can provide or what provisions I bring to the table. This from the wounded masculine space. I'm used to giving things I'm used to being inside of a space and being of need and being of want. Being of need and being of want are totally different from the higher state of divine masculine space of being of service. Being of need and being of want is being based on provision. So it becomes transactional. If I do this, I get this. This is where you have everybody on fucking pages. I want reciprocity. For what? Because if you really sit there, when I really started sitting with myself, I was like, with or without a relationship, I still got to cook for myself. I still got to eat food. With or without a relationship, I still got to pay these bills. With or without this, these things got to get done. So it may not be what I'm thinking. I'm trying to do it to a point of depletion because remember, you're still in a depletion state. So now you're sitting there, you're still in that depletion state. The depletion state is the state where your inner child is at, that you're only going to do enough until you get to a certain point because you ain't built out the rest yet. You want somebody else to do that other building aspect for you. There's a difference between conforming and actual space that's held for that energy. If I have not created that space within inside of myself, how can I go into a space of equal exchange? This is why you always see the distorted aspects in a relationship. You got to accept me the way that I am. But have you really went through the work of accepting yourself for who you are? Because if you have, eventually when you go into that space, are you accepting them for who they are? Telltale sign if you're not accepting somebody else for who they are is because you're immediately trying to change them inside of that space. Damn, I gotta, they're going, I gotta first accept, I gotta first accept that they're on their own path and their own journey. Hell, they may be an NPC. They might be a non-playable character in my work. They're only going to, their aptitude and their abilities are going to change only based on me changing my abilities first. And this comes in a psychological tone. So if I'm sitting inside of a space, if I'm always doing certain things, why would anybody else around me need to do anything if I'm always going to be there? We talked about that last week in the last week's video of really becoming honest with, if you say somebody needs space, are you giving them that initial space? And how are you, and we go into the day this week, how are you giving them that space? Are you giving that space from a sense of defensiveness, being defensive? Are you giving them that space from a sense of really being present? That means you're saying, hey, that means you're being clear and direct. Where I'm at inside of my life is this A, B, C, D, and you go down your list direct with yourself. Rather than being like, I'm free and nah, something I need to be doing. If I kept attracting, I use an example. I remember I kept attracting the same type of fucking women. Same type of women. They always felt they were deserving of something or in state of entitlement. But until I sat with myself and took an honest assessment that, hey, I'm riding off the energetic wave of entitlement as well. That's why I keep attracting these same types of chicks. Because my whole entire mindset was provisioning based on entitlement. I would provision based on a level of entitlement. I wasn't providing just to clearly provide. Even when I said I had no ulterior motive, I had an ulterior motive. My shit was just deep. Just because I was able to hide mine more. The more I'm trying to hide mine, the more I'm trying to expose theirs. I'm trying to expose their bullshit. I'm trying to overanalyze their bullshit. Because I'm trying to hide mine. Because as long as mine is hidden, I can keep feeding mine. I just keep transmitting from them. So of course all the relationships take the same damn course of action. Comes to a point to where what they're doing is no longer enough on the surface in the physical world. What they're doing is no longer enough. But because I have not yet defined my aspects of with myself internally and sat with my intimate narratives of myself, then I still need them in that space. They're my distraction. I can say I want to do all of these things, but I have not aligned, none of this, or I don't even understand, are these things aligned with my purpose? Or are these aligned with the longing aspect? So before I even came into that state of sitting with myself inside of a space, before I came into that spot of sitting inside of that space and sitting with myself inside of that space, I had to define those areas. Because if I'm not defining those areas, it doesn't matter what book I pick up, what courses I take, whatever I'm trying to bring into that space, don't matter. Because I'm only going to be able to use it to facilitate emulating something inside of the space. And it ultimately becomes my new identity. I'm spiritual as fuck. I'm vegan. I do all of these things. See, what you ain't doing is you got to do this, this, and this, and then you can get some of this right here. And you got to set. So I sound stimulating. I sound stimulating. I sound convincing. I sound convincing. I sound stimulating. I sound like it. I feel like it in context. I bring up the feelings in context. I bring up the emotions in context. But when it comes to actually applying new action, I can apply new action. I get met with, so if you're talking about all of that, why aren't you doing this? And instead of answering that honestly, I haven't answered that question to myself honestly. So of course I can answer their question honestly. So this is when you come into that space of, well, it's because of the white man and because of this and this happened to me. You got to understand, like, I went through a hard time in my life, so all I know is the hustle. So I'm trying to hustle up enough for this. So now I'm sitting back in that shadow. They bring me back to my shadow. Everybody gonna bring you back to the shadow point. If you've integrated in that space, then you can move forward. It's when you're not integrated with that space that you haven't been present with that emotional catalyst with yourself. And now it comes to actually start building things out because now you have a new standard. And your standard is not based on, my standard is based on this for these people. My standard is based on singular to me. My standard aligns with my purpose. That structuring aligns with my purpose. So when I see somebody doing something, instead of being reactive, I become responsive to what they need. What do they need next? Do I have the capacity and ability for this? Oh my God, I don't have the ability to do that right now. I'm not at the capacity to take that on right now. Oh my God, I feel I feel shameful because I did this earlier. No, if only I did this earlier, then I would be no. That's confirmation. See, confirmation gonna hurt at first. Confirmation gonna sting. Intuition is gonna sting. Confirmation is gonna hurt. Confirmation gonna confirmation gonna hit you with that headshot. Confirmation gonna hit you in the jugular. Confirmation gonna hit you with that gut shot first, because you've never had confirmation before. You don't know what confirmation feels like. Confirmation gonna come through pain first, but it's gonna be a whole body. When we think about that whole body feeling, that confirmation gonna come as a full body feeling. It's gonna hit the whole body. It's gonna force you to sit in the heart space, force you to sit in that sacral space. It's gonna force you to sit in that root space and sit with yourself. See, when you were used to validation, validation gave you a context that you could connect to another memory, to another point, to another synopsis that was playing on the side of your mind that you could use to stay the same. That confirmation is going to force you to change. That confirmation is going to force you, okay, I need to be honest. I need to be honest right now. I need to be honest with myself right now. I'm not being fully transparent with myself. I'm telling myself all of these things, these affirmations, these intentions, and doing all of these things, but I'm not really sitting with these things. I'm not really sitting with these things. I'm not sitting with them yet. So I'm moving and running and running and running and running and running and running, but I'm not sitting with these things yet. Not sitting with them. Why do I keep running? Why am I still playing the running dialogue inside of my space? Because that infatuation needs that. I need that out of breath feeling. I need that out of breath feeling. Because that's gonna make me think that I'm feeling some shit. So I need to keep running and running and running and running. I don't need to sit down. Anything that's gonna bring up those emotions that I don't want to sit with, I'm gonna avoid. I'm running in a circle. I'm running in the ring. I'm running in that circle. It's gonna come back up. And it's gonna present itself something different. What am I longing for? I was longing for acceptance when the whole entire time I just earlier this week had a conversation with my pops. Just had a conversation with my pops. And my pops told me that my pops ultimately accepted everything that I did. And he said it so many fucking times. My pop's favorite line to me towards his transition point was, whether it's a good bad son or a bad son, still my son. He said it before in that space. I remember every single time when I felt like shit was going bad in the back of my past, back in the earlier points of my days, and my pops always said, no matter what happens, as long as you're honest, when you come back through that door, you always can come back here. My pops was always telling me he accepted me. But I couldn't see it because this is when we talk about the shadow, I put my inner child behind the shadow that he casted based on his traumatic experiences, overcasted my inner child where I sat myself and casted my shadow to go out further to connect that shadow, that transgenerational trauma. So I'm running that shit. I'm keep doing it. I'm still in that shadow. So when I'm looking at my pops to tell me I'm good enough, when I'm looking at my mom, tell me that I'm good enough, when I'm looking for them to tell me that I'm good enough, they can't say that to me because they never had that said to them. So instead of me sitting, not knowing how to sit with that, where do I go? I go for somebody to give that to me. And I mastered a lot of things inside of that space. Mastered a lot of skills. Always being the youngest in every aptitude, everything that I did. From the first legal job that I had, being the youngest manager ever in a grocery store, to always being the youngest inside of a position. But always running. I couldn't sit with it because once I had it, I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't have the skill, I didn't have the capacity or the ability to hold that in my space. Didn't have the capacity or the ability for it. Always being told that you're strong and you're all of these things. I didn't believe it. So I constantly needed people to tell me that shit. And instead of accepting it, I became so augmented in it, I'd be like, well, I mean, I'm just doing my job. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to be doing. That was my program. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, I'm supposed to be doing it. That was my predestination. I'm just doing what was needed inside of this space at the point in time. I'm just going through the motions. Mentally, I'm stuck within the motions. But at the same time, this is how I knew I was stuck in those motions. Because when I didn't get that praise, that ego boost, that shame would come up. That guilt, that doubt. Why I get looked over? Why I get looked over for that? Because I didn't understand the logical reason. I didn't understand the aspect of that needed to be done. If I say I don't need it, that means I'm giving it to myself first. I'm already giving it to myself. If I'm saying I don't want it, when I said I need and I need not, want not, that means I'm providing it to myself. I'm moving the aspects of my desires. That means everything is provided for. That means in my desire of my works, my due diligence of my works, everything naturally is going to come into the position and into the fold. I use an example. I had today, while I was going, today setting up sessions for next week. I had a person hit me up yesterday, and then the message came through my the virtual assistant hit and chimed and dropped the message in. And the lady asked me, she was like, do you do Reiki attunements? That means, like, do I certify people in Reiki? Do I do the certification? And I was like, no, I don't do the certifications. No, I don't do the certifications. Right now, all I do is provide the services. I don't do attunements. I don't do certifications. Right before I was sitting there having this conversation with this woman, I was already looking at the mastery, the certifications for the master teacher aspect. I had to wait like 6 months. It's been way past 6 months. I just been doing so much other stuff when you think about it. But I was like, all right, cool. So she hit me with that. And she literally, I was like, it won't be until about January, February when I start doing the certification things. It just came out. I was like, okay. She was like, I had no expectation. Took away, this the key, take away expectations. She was like, so how do I sign up for the classes in January? I was like, oh shit. I was like, well, right now, all I need is your email. And then I will keep you informed when I open up for the classes. I'll send you everything from the pricing, payment options, things of that nature, dates, and all of that stuff. All I need is your email address right now. Now, prior to this, the reason why this is so in the aspect of confirmations after the action, prior to that point, remember, if you've been rocking with me, you're on my Facebook, you're one of my friends on Facebook, you've known that ever since the beginning of this year, this same time last year, I was starting to put out the aspects of starting to do classes, certifications. Right now, I have a class going for the chakra and shadow. We're in the last 2 weeks of it. We're talking about the reflexes of the shadow and actually doing the understanding mudras and doing the symbolism. I already started the Code Academy. So for that to come in at the same point of, around the same space of time, when we think about time, the emotional catalyst for that to come in, I was like, nigga, I'm in the right space. That's my confirmation for so much shit. That's how I stay focused. That's how I stay productive. Everything that I say is law. But I have to build out the space for those laws to be implemented. See, when you're in that love state of being, everything you do is law. See, the hardest thing about aspect people stuck in that fear state, you can intellectualize and romanticize the laws. I am a god. I am what I say I am. And then all of a sudden shit populates based on what you say. It's going to say it's not based on what you want to be, what you think that you are, what you are becoming. It's what you are at that point in time. And it all is now you got the random people in your inbox, and you got the same people hitting you in your inbox every time around the same. Okay, how are you approaching them? Remember, we talking about energetically. How are you energetically approaching that situation in that space? What are you doing while you're energetically inside of that space? What are you entertaining while you're inside of that space? I don't know how to do this. Oh shit, let me do it. Sorry. Energetically inside of that space. How are you attuning to yourself inside of that space energetically? See, when we're changing that dynamic and you're now building out that new space is supposed to be the nothing. From nothing to something to nothing. See, the lustful state keeps you inside of the something. It keeps you compartmentalizing and putting things. I'm going to set all of this up over here in this same space and then hope for the best. I'm going to hope for the best. Why am I not getting this? Why is this not happening? Why is this not happening? Why is this not happening? Use the examples. I remember I see people all the time up and down my Facebook timeline talking about the people on Facebook is this and the people on Facebook is that, and they aren't supporting me and all of this shit. I'm like, what are you building out? Think about the energetic imprint that you put into that space. If I built a space out of guilt, if I build a space out of pride, if I built a state out of vices, then what do you think is going to populate that space? Everything that's going to feed that vice. Everything that's going to feed that vice. But if I build that space out of my newly assessed standard and my newly assessed structure, That means I didn't just put it together to put it together. Like, for example, I have 4 Facebook pages. I created Papa Lucy Sunday Service as a page. I created the God Alchemist. The God Hour podcast page. Before that, I created another page. I just kept creating pages because I didn't understand the purpose of actually, because every time that I plateaued my original page, instead of doing the work to my original page, that means continue posting content that's going to drop my friends list down so I can rebuild it. I said, fuck it, I'm going to do another page. I'm going to invite certain people from this page to that page, and I'm going to populate this page. I'm going to populate this page. Now I got this page populated. But it's the same people. It's going to be the same thing, because the same reason I built this page, same reason I built this page. Until now, I only use 2 pages. I just have not gotten around to deactivating the other 2 pages. Now I got 2 pages. Papa Samdi, God Alchemist. I just went through and revamped my YouTube page. Pure Papa Samdi. My TikTok, Papa Samdi. My Instagram is going to be Papa Samdi. They're all going to be linked to the same thing. Now, the business elements that I add into those pages, those, of course, be God Alchemist, because Papa Samdi is the representative of God Alchemist. I have to create the direction. See, in that state of you understanding aspects in the spiritual state of being from the whole state, being in the balanced state, is you are now creating the direction. You are now creating based on your flow. That means you are creating something, allowing it to populate, learning, and it allows it to dismantle itself again. It naturally now has everything that I have inside of my space naturally has its own dismantling. Until naturally, when I go into these spaces, I know the sequence of the events that I put into a page. See, when you're now moving inside of that new space and you built that structure, one of the hardest things that we're going to face in that human narrative is building out that space. Because you got to go through, everybody knew you as your trauma. Everybody knew you as your problems. Everybody knew you as your issues. Everybody knew you as all of the lesser shit. Now that you coming into your higher self, the same lack of convincing that you did in the traumatic state, now it's all the aspects of you actually building shit in that space. All of the feelings that you went through, feeling alone, nobody supported you, there was a reason that all of those events happened, is because the space that you got to go into to build, you're going to be alone. You're not going to be alone because, you have your spiritual teams and things of that nature. But in that physical cadence, the infatuation that you depended upon, that lust that you depended upon, you can't use that there. It doesn't work there. It doesn't translate there. That stimulation that you were using, the stimulus that you were using are not going to work there. This is the holistic or the natural state of being inside of that space. That doesn't work there anymore. That natural aspect now has to be applied. That means anything that you didn't work on in this space, anything that you created, this is how I've broken this down before, where you are not willing, you create the responsibility, so to speak. Where one is not willing, you create the responsibilities inside of that space, so to speak. That means the relationship, the second coming of a relationship with your mother after everything happened, second relationship that you created with your child, the relationship that you created with friends and people, and the whole way that you used to view relationships, none of that shit's gonna work anymore. It's not supposed to. This is when you come into the space, like I use an example. I was watching the Cartier brothers. and they were responding. They were listening to. You get your information from everywhere. They were. What were they doing? They were listening. The first thing that popped up was like the first time listening to Black Thought, and Black Thought did a freestyle on Funkmaster Flex, and he went 11 minutes straight. Just went in eating shit, and the dude was sitting there. He was like, he was like, I got to sit back and listen to this again because I don't comprehend what he's saying. I got to be on a whole different level to even understand and dissect what he's saying inside of that space. And then he said that, he was like, that was him being honest inside of that space. And then they went to King Lowe's. They went to King Lowe's, and he dropped in the aspect. And King Lowe's was like, I love all of them opera. I love the mumble rappers because without them, because they're the result of me being in the space that I'm in. I need them. I love them like I love myself. So when you're going into that space, this is when I really started understanding, and that true aspect of love and compassion is loving people for where they're at, but leaving them there and accepting their capacity and their ability inside of that space. Their lack of substance is based on my lack of substance. So was I looking for substance or stimulation? Because everybody coming to me and they're looking for stimulation, I'm still looking for stimulation somewhere. Somewhere deep down in the deep of myself, I'm looking for stimulation somewhere. I have not created the substance. I have not created the new element. That's the aspect of that. I have not created that new element. I have not committed to that alchemy. I have not committed that new element yet. So until I create that new element, go back to Iron Man 2. Remember when Tony was sitting there trying to create a different, more substantial element than palladium? He kept burning that shit out. That's what I kept doing inside of those spaces. So of course, at my job, to where before at my job, and I started noticing it in these spaces. When you start noticing you're doing that work in those spaces, because I noticed when I was going to my job, the more happier I was becoming with my own self, the less that I needed anger to drive me. The more that I could observe and walk out of a space, the more naturally, instead of me sitting inside of a space, because this is when you understand in certain spaces and understanding that this is you developing inside of your purpose. Now I'm sitting in a space, I'm like, I see why I don't mind staying late for work, and it's not about the money anymore. I don't mind staying and closing at night, then coming back opening in the morning. Yo, how are you closing, leaving here at 1, coming back at 7 in the morning and opening in the AM and shit? How are you doing that? Because I'm not thinking about it. You must really want that bread. I'm not thinking about the money. The money's an afterthought. I have not yet created the new element that is, I have not yet created the new element or the new space yet. So that goes back to what I was saying in the beginning and the aspects of me waking up at 4 o'clock in the AM. When I started waking up at 4 o'clock in AM and I still had to go to work, I still would do this when I started first doing my meditation. I couldn't go work out. I would do my meditation. And then I either have to walk to work, take the bus to work, or Uber, Lyft, whatever to work. You feel what I'm saying? But then that's when I first started. Before that, I already started typing out the God Thought. I was like, this when I started the God Thought. I really started with a blog. I didn't like talking to people. I started the blog post. And then I remember the first time I was sitting there outside of Red Lobster on a cold afternoon. Red Lobster on a cold ass afternoon. No, it was a little warm outside. And I had my phone in my hand. And I did not feel like typing. And I did my first live. First live, 15 minutes. I said you were a God. I was talking to myself in the phone. My first couple of lives, you go on my Facebook, my YouTube channel, and the first couple of ones when I was sitting in front of my job, I was talking to myself. How would I want information conveyed to me? So that was the first part. How am I digesting this information? So I'm now finding the new tone of the person that I'm visualizing. Before I understood I was visualizing the person that I was becoming. Before visualizing and becoming this person, before the preface to the alchemical process, I had to understand why I was becoming that person. So I had to go through it. If you look at my page and you look at my YouTube channel, you go from the beginning YouTube's videos all the way up to the recent ones, it's an entire shift of the dynamic because I've absorbed in every space. Literally became more transparent until I broke it down into the simplest concept, the most simplest element. What's missing? See, the lustful state, I'm looking for what to add based on what needs to be replaced based on lack. So as long as I'm lacking something, I'm always looking for something to replace it. I hope this doesn't happen like last time. Hope this doesn't burn out. It's like sitting there on that scene on I Am Legend with Will Smith, and he kept trying to do this. He kept trying to find the cure, and it went to the end when he found the cure. But then his sacrifice, because he was so stuck in that space and not wanting to leave that space, he sent that shit on, and he could have left, but he didn't. See, when I'm sitting in that state of that lust, that aspect of that physical lust, that mental lust, the expectations, I won't leave a space because I still have some type of energetic need for it. So now I shifted from running to sitting my ass down and owning this, because now I got to go through these spaces, the spaces that I need to own to sit down. When I really started sitting, I was like, wait, this is different. This ain't what I remembered. Because you have to remember. You got to remember it like this. Gratitude. Ooh, I like that. I like TikTok more than y'all. I had to remember. You got to remember this. Remember that karmic echo? Every time you speak something, you speak an echo and it populates out of space. This is how you create those karmic points inside of your space. So everything that I lived through that I wish that I would have did when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, I had to live it out first. There is another great interview. You get information from everywhere. It's a podcast. I forgot the name of that bitch, but it had Dame Dash on there. They had Dame Dash on that bitch. Dame Dash on there. And Dame was like, I really have nothing I don't want for nothing, because everything that I wanted to do, I've done. So now I can do new shit. He was talking about all of them. Your dream don't die until it comes to fruition. So think about what you wanted to do when you was 8, 9, 10, and 11 years old. That dream does not dissipate until you comes to fruition. So until you knock that out and do that and bring it to the present and formulate it inside of the present and experiment with it in the present, you don't learn anything. I give you a nice example. Before the ninth grade, I had a beautiful voice. I could sing. I could sing very well. After my 9th grade year of high school, there was this one chick that I was talking to. Or she was mad cute. She was always in front of me. I was the quintessential. If you remember, let's go back to the Tyrese. You remember Tyrese, the sweet lady? He's sitting in there. He's singing a song, and the lady look at him, Or you look at Usher, like how they did that the mid, like one my homegirl calls it, one of my homegirls call it the midnight love era. I was in that era. But this, I'm gonna give you some crazy shit to how I built out unconsciously how you use the alchemy all the time. I used to think that the R&B singers and the rappers and everybody, I used to love R&B singers because all of the octaves, the falsettos, all of those sounds, everything that they did, I thought they were getting paid on that because that was their voice. I didn't have no idea about engineers, somebody producing it and changing out and changing out the levels. Like some people can't hit different octaves, but I didn't know this. So I developed my voice to do the octaves. Developed my voice to do the octaves. And I used to sing, I used to sit behind this chick in class. And every day I would sit there and start humming, then I'd start singing. And then she would turn around and sing louder. And I was, of course, as a good Anubis, sing louder, get a little bit louder. Until one day in particular, her man sitting over there, he get mad, he look at me. I get scared, like this ain't gonna hit me, the nigga big as fuck, I'm small. I was a small kid in 9th grade, very small. I didn't come into my self yet in that space. I just was coming into myself. Said, fuck it. Got mad, upset. My voice went away. The harmony, my natural harmony and happiness inside of myself, my innocence, the last of my innocence up to that point, because of everything else I was going through in that point, every other traumatic point, shut it down. It shut down the ability. And this is a key when you're understanding like why you didn't come out the womb with powers. Because if you came out the womb with powers and went through what you went through, you would have became a fucking mass murderer. So I was like, fuck it. Now, before this, I didn't know how to write songs. I didn't know how to write bridges, write bridges, put a hook. I didn't know how to do any of that. But so I was like, fuck it, I'm going to start rapping. I'm going to start doing freestyles and poetry and shit. So I didn't know how to write a poem. Line, rhyme, line, rhyme, line, rhyme, line. So I started writing those out. So then as I developed this persona of myself, this person, I remember I had my homeboy came, my homeboy Javier. He drew a picture of me. He was like, yo, this is who, if you did this right, he drew a version of me that he saw of me. This is like way back. This is like 8th grade. He drew this version of me that I became. He drew the version of me that I later became. This is my first chance seeing, before I even knew what this motherfucker scribed and literally drew out the version of me out of clay on a piece of paper with a fucking big pen. I'm talking about the big pen, you hold that bitch too long, that bitch bursts and that bitch get ink all over your fingers too much if it get too hot. He drew me out and I became that version of myself. He drew out a version of me that shit implemented in my head. As I was getting older, I became that person. See, I didn't understand the catalyst of everybody around you is going to create a different perception. And since I was stuck in that traumatic state, I was so dependent or selfless. I had no body, I had no form of my own. So I allowed everybody to create the form that best suited for them. I remember the last thing that my Pop said before he had transitioned in that song. He was like, don't be like me. I didn't understand how not to be like anybody else. That's why when I went to school, left the house, went to school, all of that aspect, I became this other version of myself. But I ultimately lived out every aspect of a certain point from back when I was 5, 6, the version of me that I wish that stood up in front of my pops, in front of my mom, the version of me that was stronger. I was living out those versions of myself. That's all I was doing. Once then, for me, once the infatuation left, I was done with it. I didn't need it anymore. I was still operating because I told the story before. Back when I was 1 year old, I've always operated in the same sense. When I'm done with something, I burn everything to the ground. I don't want it anymore. From 1 year old, when I did no longer wanted to drink out of a sippy cup, out of a bottle, none of that shit, I was like, all right, cool. My pops is in the backyard. He's burning leaves. I'm going to put all my shit in the wagon, walk it out there in my little Tykes wagon, roll my shit out there, look at him in the face, throw my shit in the fire. I've always been that way. I lost that ability. That ability had to be minimized. Because if I kept that ability, I would be an entirely different person. I would not be in alignment with my shit. See, when you're going down your purpose and you're going between lust and love, when you're going between the lust and the love, you're learning how to direct yourself, because you might need to go through that point of that lusting stage to get to a point of love stage. And you got to go through each one of those points. When I tell people all the time, like, my traumatic imprint from my years, my traumatic imprint in this life cycle was quite very, 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 was very, very light. It wasn't as heavy. It wasn't as detrimental. It wasn't as my clients and some of the people that I deal with, and that it wasn't like theirs. Even that was different, because I remember when it came online, my past lives, bro. I remember my past lives. I remember being in them colonial times. I remember I always had a choice. And that got triggered when Kanye West said slavery was a choice. That re-triggered a whole bunch of different shit that happened in my mind. That's a whole nother lecture. We'll get into that in a whole nother live. But that triggered a whole nother set of events. I was like, I've been making choices this entire time. I chose to come back to this time point. I could have came back earlier. What version of myself would I have been back earlier? So now when I'm starting to look inside of those spaces, I can see what person I can visualize and sit there and be like, hold up, wait, I can conceptualize this idea. Even though it's not part of my current status, my current self, where I was currently at, I can emulate it and pull it in and see what that person was. You're always inside of that attunement. But this is the importance of doing the internal work. If you're not doing the internal work, you cannot come into that level of attunement. Like, for example, here's another fun tip. Hell, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do some candle work. I'm gonna do my altar work today. That candle sitting right there by that light, right here. This one right here, for example, one that got all my sigils and symbols on it. These are all me. I lit this I got all of these candles on, for example, Tuesday. I got all these candles on Tuesday. I lit this motherfucker. These are 7-day candles. Lit this bitch on Tuesday. It is now Friday. By Thursday, this candle was this. These other two candles, they've been burning since the same time. Burn them on Tuesday at that one full moon, that lovely full moon that we had. And I walked outside that AM, and I walked outside, and I'm thinking Mars is in the front, but I'm like, wait, that's the lunar eclipse. Let me go on my run. See, when you're inside of that space and you're no longer waiting for something and you're now operating in your full flow, those moments that come up, you're able to capitalize on without even thinking about them. I don't be thinking about the fucking full moon. I'm just doing shit. There's a full moon coming? Oh, shit. Me seeing a full moon is an afterthought. Me seeing 11/11 is an afterthought. That's my confirmation. See, when you're learning the lesson, that's your validation or your marking point. Okay, because of the full moon, I'm supposed to do this. But then when you learn that lesson inside of that space, Instead of me saying on the full moon I release, the full moon is when I charge. See, before, I had to release to the full moon because I had to detox, I had to go through fasting, I had to go through those stages to dump that shit off. So, of course, I had to go through that phase first. But now I understand that in the darkness is where I'm doing all of my work. I'm a shadow worker. I'm a shadow shaman. I'm a crossroads father. I'm a father of a crossroad. What the fuck? My shit happening, my releasing is in the new moon. So during the full moon, I'm fully charged. Because the way it was shown to me was backwards. See, when you come into this love balance, the whole state of self, you're understanding, oh shit, that's okay. I'm seeing this as myself until I see myself as this, it does not change. Until I accept myself as this, it does not change. Until I see myself as this, it doesn't change. Until I accept myself as this, it will not change. It will continue until I accept myself as that. And that's that key. Once you unlock your purpose, you got to keep moving inside of your purpose. Your purpose will dismantle you. Your purpose will destroy you if you allow it. Because your purpose is destructive. Your purpose is it's meant to destroy things. So in spaces where you ain't present, of course it's going to destroy it. It's only in the spaces where you're holding, once you've established your standards, assess the standards, the structure now devolves, the destroying part happens, the stability falls away. Then you come back into that new space. Okay, cool. My stability, okay, my crutch is gone. That stability, that temporary stability, that was a crutch. It's time for me to go forward. That old structure starts to fall away. All right, cool. That was my old crutch. I need to move forward. All right, cool. Before I move forward, let me take this time where all of this shit is falling away and everything's burning. Let me take this time to assess my standards, become aware of the new standards that I need to set and what I need to really build inside of my space. Honesty is the comprehension of transparency. The honesty is the comprehension of transparency and vulnerability. I cannot leave out of my comfort zone until I reach a point of vulnerability. If there's a vulnerability inside of this space, that's the space that I go out through. It might be, this when we use the example, it might be that relationship that pushed you to your fucking limit. That's the vulnerable space. You got to go through that. Stop trying to omit, divert. I don't want to do with that part though, because that's the part that you need to go through. Because without that, you're going to keep doing the same exact thing. You're just going to go into the new space carrying the same old stuff. I had another point, but even in the aspects of what I was saying, I wanted to go back and I wanted to explain the aspects of the music and how I came into certain things, but like I allowed myself to go the other route. All the routes are right for me. The only thing wrong with any other routes is what I do not accept about that route. If I do not like that route, if that route makes me feel some type of way, now I won't do it. Okay, I'm not going to do this. But I'm going to be clear and direct. If it comes up, I'm going to be clear and direct into the space of why I'm not going to do it. Instead of me sitting there saying, you know what, I'm going to ignore it. I can't ignore things anymore. I just said I wanted to be all-seeing and all-knowing and omnipresent. I just said I'm a fucking God. I just said I'm a Titan. I just said a whole line of them, all of these different things. This don't come to me now. I called it to me. The only time that I'm triggered by something in that space is if I'm not sitting inside of my purpose. I'm allowing my humanity to run rampant. Going into that space. Especially on this 11/11. There's a shift that happening. You can't keep going back into that old mentality. Well, I'm just going to go back to my safety. Ain't no more safeties. You You let go of safeties a long time ago. That's what keeps getting you. That's what keeps gomming up the works, that you keep going back to those old safeties. That goes into the aspects of that Nine of Wands. Nine of Wands represents the end of that cycle of those old decisions, old thought processes, old ideals. That old ideal and conception of yourself has come to an end. The version of you that sustained inside of that space, you got to remember, when you're shifting out of a space, the version of you that you became to maintain yourself, that form inside of that space, has to go away as well. You just can't keep taking these versions of yourself in the new space. This is how a lot of people keep getting stuck. That goes into the aspects of that star. Make a wish, let it flow. Or that I call the star card. The star card is Aquarian energy, the water bearer, pouring out those emotions, allowing that shit to flow. The only way you gonna get what the fuck you desire is letting the flow go of what you need and what you think that you wanted. What you thought you wanted, what you thought you needed in that space with yourself, now it's time to let that go. So we have the end of the cycle of you making those decisions that keep you bound up. You keep making those decisions that keep you bound up because you're afraid, because you have that fear of the new emotional conquest or the new emotional lessons and journey that you have to go on. That's what's lighting up your path. That leads into the aspects of that Eight of Coins. Eight of Coins represents you have this inherent cycling of you come to that point, you reach a point of infatuation with the enlightenment of the information that you get, and then you immediately try to put it back to work back here. The Eight of Coins is acknowledging that, I can't keep using this information and doing the same. It does me no good. It does me no good to keep getting all this information, to keep coming into a state of where it's time. Even if you're coming into a state, of example, if you're coming into a state where it's time for you to accept new counsel, that means you got everybody around you, they're your old counsel. You have become smarter than everybody in the room. You became smarter than everybody in the room. You became more stable than anybody inside of the room. You became more structured than anybody inside of the room. In a physical sense, emotional sense, experimental sense, you're not afraid to try new things and things of that nature, but you're the only one inside of that space that seems to want to be able to reach that form. One thing that my mentor taught me, either you're charging too little or you're not charging enough. Ain't no such thing as charging too much. Either you're not charging too little or you're not charging enough. You're charging too little because you have too many people around you. That means you letting out too much light and everybody's around you. Or your charge isn't high enough. Because the higher your charge becomes, remember, the higher that you rise, the darker that other space, the bigger your shadow becomes, the higher that you get. The bigger that space, that void, that the nothing becomes. So if you're afraid of not being, not exist, this is why I tell people all the time, you're afraid of no longer existing. You're afraid of no longer existing. A lot of times we come into these spaces, the reason that it's so hard for you to leave a certain space is because you're afraid to no longer exist. You're afraid to look like the madman or the mad woman. You're afraid to fully embrace the exalted version of that chaos. That exalted version of that chaos. One of the things that I said, it was an example of myself, like all last year, up until around this time last year, I ain't cut my hair. Like I kept my hair wrapped up. Didn't cut hair on side head. It was thick. shit thick. My hair gets thick. Until I came to a point where I was sitting there, I was like, you know what? I was lining up my beard because I just started going live again, doing TikToks and videos and stuff of that nature. And I did the first haircut. I was like, it's time. Because I had to, it's one thing to stay within that chaotic space because emotionally it feels good. It gives you a context of feeling, it gives you a context of stimulation, it gives you a context of your opinions and your beliefs matter. It gives you all of these aspects. Your opinions and your beliefs matter inside of that space. That's why you don't leave. Spiritual lust. The stimulation that you get from that space of everybody wanting to be around you. The mental capacity, the intellectual lust, because you know a bunch of shit. The emotional lust of the aspect of you're able to persuade and keep everybody moving in the same certain way, getting the same feeling. That's the emotional. The expectation aspect, that lusting based on expectation, the longing for somebody to be, the longing for the right people to be around you. You got to make the first step, or you get stuck in that physical lust. You want somebody to coddle you. Somebody's either going to push you, someone's going to push you to the point, and that's the next card came off. Six of Cups. Someone's going to push you past the point. Somebody is now going to push you past the point of your old convictions. You're going to be pushed past the point of your old convictions. The entire structure, standard, and the whole synopsis that you've been locked in. Some may because of the trauma, some because of the new shit that you built on. You built an addition onto that same house. I've talked about a burning house before. You can't keep building additions onto the burning house. Your convictions are being tested. That leads into the aspects of that judgment. They're getting tested so you could actually learn this level right here. You're stepping out of that judgment zone. You're stepping out of the old judgment. You're being judged, you're being seen a certain way. Now you're at a certain space in your life, and you're like, now you're trying to implement new things you're trying to move forward or move others forward in that sense, but you haven't done the moving forward for yourself first. It's kind of hard for me to convince others or to break down and speak and teach others if I have not learned how to simplify it yet. I can keep saying to myself, well, I'm good where I'm at. But that's a lie for me. Because if it was true, then that intrusive thought that keep coming up of everybody coming around me saying, oh, I should be here, those wouldn't faze me. I wouldn't even have to say anything. I could honestly sit inside of that space because I've built out the plan. I have the framework, the vision board. I have everything built out. I'm good. I'm great. I'm not doing it for anything. You know what I'm saying? And that leads into the aspects of that glamour, that magician. That judgment is going to shatter that glamour. And this is the hardest part for a lot of us. Because we got used to feeding that glamour in a certain way. The biggest thing when it comes to that emotional space, in that lusting state, that longing for state, is that you got used to feeding that glamour based on a certain way. So everybody operated a certain way inside of your space, and it fit because everybody inside of your space fit that certain dialogue. So you can keep saying it does me no good. And I've talked about this before with people. It does me no good to say that I'm at a certain level if I can't operate at that level at all times. And understanding the necessity of being able to mask myself, turn it on, turn it off. I don't need to have it on all the time. It's me. So there is no on-off switch. It's me. I operate as me at all times. There is no, let me act this way in this space, act this way at my job, act this way. I've literally already went through the process of shedding any glamour or any space where I had to act in a certain glamour. I've literally removed all of the spaces that were based on me acting in a certain glamour. All glamours have been removed. This me. Slashes in my eyebrows, trying to wild out and all that good shit. This is me. I'm now in full ownership of me in that space, authentically. And this motherfucker got way more gifts and way more abilities. At this level, he has way more abilities. He can move as he's way more in tune with a lot of more shit. And I love it. And I'm gonna pull one more card. I just got told to pull one more card. As always, the key to get out of the cycle is to understand how that cycle started and how it needs to begin. The way that you win is the way that you're gonna go out. The way that you win in is the way that you're gonna go out. That means doing the opposite that's in opposition. So if you were always used to making a lot of money, you're gonna go out with no money. As an example, in that aspect of the example. You're gonna have to go through that karmic period of you is gonna be struggling in the aspect of the shift. If you went through your shift, so on the other end of that, if you went into that shift, if you went into this space humble, knowing, okay, cool, it's not about money. It's actually about me actually acquiring, becoming the resource, grabbing the resource, building out my space. You're about to go through your cycle of the abundance. Now you're going to go through the other end of the aspects of that abundance, and the aspect of everything's going to start flowing in towards you. See, if you went into this space full, you're going to leave out empty, because you need to leave out empty so you can build. And if you went into this space empty, now you're going to come out defined. This is a card that means an aspect I'm looking at for myself. I came into this space empty. And I've spent the last 11 months redefining everything from rescaling things, breaking things down, changing shit, shifting shit around, letting things sit in the back burner, focusing on one thing instead of jumping around, because I know I can jump around. So now one of my biggest things, especially me being a manifestor generator, one of my things is I can jump and make a whole bunch of spaces, but now it's time for me to learn the patience of sitting and allowing a space to fully develop and not running from it. Allowing it to develop in all of its glamour, all of its beauty, allowing it to be an empty space, and then allow myself to define it. That's that key for that. So we got the end of the cycle of those decisions, the decision that you made, the end of the cycle of making that decision is going to lock you back into that space. It's going to be a very emotional tithing point, because a lot of that stuff's about to come up. A lot of lights are about to go. A lot of lights are going off inside of your head right now and in your body. And it's time to define that flow. You're no longer inside of that cycle. When you get to this point right here where you're grabbing the information just to make old shit work, that's not going to work anymore. Think about this card being in reverse. Remember, I use cards to illustrate information. Now it's time for you to move from this enlightenment stage into your endarkenment. And that's the work phase. That's going to lead into the aspect of your old convictions are going to be tested. How you've held yourself and what you keep doing, it ain't going to work no more. All those convictions are going to be pushed to the brink. Leaving you in a state of understanding past judgments. Allowing the judgments to pass. Pulling into the aspects that you can no longer feed those old glamours based on those old judgments. I can no longer say that I know I'm this, this, and this, because it's only feeding that old glamour. And that's going to lead to that emptying. So you can now redefine that space. I desire you to be the fucking best. I desire you to be the motherfucking best. I guess you want me to pull that too? All right, cool. You're now in a state of renewal. There's been some things you've been putting off. There's been some things that you've been putting off long enough now. It's time for you to go through that state of renewal. There's some classes, there's some lessons that you've been putting off fully adapting, fully sitting with those lesson points, and that leads right behind that you've been waiting on this certain level of dependability, because you develop, the longer you let a lesson stay there, the more you become dependent upon that lesson. Little fun fact in that. But yeah, you have a choice. Every day you wake up, you got a chance. You got a choice. Those choices come with options. And those options come with opportunities or obstacles. It's your choice. The same box that you're reaching in for an opportunity, in that same box is the same as the obstacle. You have a choice. You're now stepping into a state of developing and defining your love state. You're developing the love state. You're developing inside of the love state. You're no longer going to be operating in this limbo state where it's gather information, gather energy, the gathering phase. You're now having to take this. Now you're coming to that cycle point where it's like, where am I going to take this? Am I going to stay in this limbo-like state and allow it to dissipate and fall back down and keep going through the same cycle? Or am I going to take this to the next? Or am I going to allow this to help me stand up and populate inside of that love state? What's my lessons of learning and applying is, what can I simplify? What is my purpose? The state of being right now for a lot of people, a lot of y'all, a lot of us, is defining your purpose. Some of you are plateaued out. You can't do no more inside of that space. But just because you plateaued out, that don't mean go get something new. What skills have you learned based on what you've been doing that you can develop into something else and new? See that key? Using an example, when I relaunched Core Alchemy at the top of the year, I've learned so many new great things. So when I do the launch of that, now it's a new thing. I've learned so many new things. So when I apply them, it's to the mechanic of moving it forward, not keeping it the same. If it ain't moving you forward, why is it there? If it's not moving you forward, but it's showing you yourself, that's why it's there. You got to understand why it's there. If you're used to always running and moving forward, and something forcing you to sit the fuck down, sit down. If you're used to sitting down and something keeps pushing you to move forward, might need to move forward. Your choice. But again, I desire you to be the best. This video, this full live, will be available on my YouTube channel this week. I was going to say, I'm looking at I'm like, if you lying, you're going to say it. Either be between Monday and Wednesday, the replays of the Friday night Papa's Friday night sessions. Between Monday and Wednesday, they'll be available on my YouTube channel, Papa Samdi. Papa Samdi is the new YouTube channel. You already subscribed to my YouTube channel. Ain't gonna matter. When you go on there, you don't see Papa Samdi. You don't see I've done some new stuff in there. Look real, real different in that space. But don't let this be your end. This is your beginning. What you do from this point is your choice. I show you skill, I give you the skill. I create you a new skill. What are you going to do with it? Nobody can want this more than you. Nobody can want it more than you. Nobody can need it more than you. Nobody can move inside of your desire, your potential, your purpose, your becoming fucking best. Nobody. We can aid, we can assist, we can suggest, we can whisper. Papa can sit with you a little bit, but that's on you. Link in the bio, or you hit the little link. I'm doing other finger points because when this goes to my YouTube channel, or you can hit right here in this where it says, you can go above in the page, it says website, subscribe, hit the buttons over there. but it's on you. I'm gladly gonna tell people, like, I'm doing my work. It's time to show your work. I love you. Appreciate everybody for coming through. Thank you for